General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, April 16th. I find myself deeply fascinated by the script's structural choices and character building presented to us. The storyline shows that Cassius is heavily entrenched in a dangerous game of deception, impersonating the late Nathan. This plot point alone introduces a profound layer of dramatic irony, as the audience is aware of the masquerade while the residents of Port Charles remain largely in the dark. The episode highlights Cassius's growing paranoia, specifically directed at Jocelyn. Jocelyn is actively investigating the whereabouts of Faison, operating under the assumption that he is hiding somewhere within the town limits. When analysing Cassius's reaction to Jocelyn's sleuthing, this suggests a high level of self-preservation masking deep-seated anxiety. The character is portrayed as someone who is cornered, and in storytelling, a cornered antagonist is often the most unpredictable. I feel that Cassius's suspicion of Jocelyn may be the catalyst for a much darker turn in his character arc. The narrative focuses on the looming threat he poses to her. This development suggests that, sooner or later, Cassius could actively target Jocelyn to silence her investigation. Furthermore, looking at the broader structural integration of past villains, I have another theory regarding Cassius's capabilities. I think Cassius might be the unseen hand behind the recent psychological torment inflicted upon Anna. The storyline appears to be setting up a scenario where Cassius is not just impersonating Nathan, but is also flawlessly mimicking Faison's voice. This situation reflects a deeply manipulative tactic designed to drive Anna to the brink of insanity, making her believe that Faison is still alive. This indicates a level of narrative complexity where one antagonist is weaponizing the legacy of another to destabilize key legacy characters. Again, this is just my interpretation, but if true, it elevates Cassius from a mere imposter to a psychological mastermind. Transitioning to the political and interpersonal maneuverings in Port Charles, the storyline shows that Laura is currently being manipulated by Ezra. What makes this arc particularly compelling is the revelation of Ezra's true motives. The narrative focuses on the fact that Ezra's manipulation is not born of inherent malice toward Laura, but rather from a place of sheer desperation. He is being coerced by Sidwell, a dangerous figure who has threatened Ezra with death if he fails to manipulate Laura into serving Sidwell's agenda. This situation reflects a classic ticking clock scenario in scriptwriting. The character is portrayed as trapped between a rock and a hard place. Ezra's actions, while morally compromised, are driven by survival instinct. Laura, usually astute, remains oblivious to this intricate trap. However, the storyline introduces Sonny as the narrative foil to Ezra's deception. Sonny's instincts are sharp, and his protective nature over Laura is a consistent character trait. This development suggests that Sonny has already picked up on the inconsistencies in Ezra's behavior. I feel that Sonny's intervention is inevitable. This may lead to a highly tense confrontation where Sonny interrogates Laura about her recent dealings, followed by a direct, likely threatening approach toward Ezra. By secretly threatening Ezra, Sonny could force him to spill Sidwell's secrets. This indicates a shift in the power dynamic, moving the narrative from a story of silent manipulation to one of overt gangland strategy. Intertwined with the Sidwell plot is Ava's increasingly precarious position. I think Ava is inadvertently playing right into Sidwell's hands, much like Ezra, but perhaps with less awareness of the stakes. The episode highlights Ava potentially acting as an emissary for Sidwell, seeking out Laura to speak highly of him. Ava appears completely unaware of how foolish and dangerous her current alliances are. This situation reflects Ava's tragic flaw, her tendency to align herself with dangerous men without fully calculating the collateral damage to her own life. Sonny, who is deeply embedded in the criminal underworld's intelligence network, likely knows about Ava's connections. The storyline appears to be setting up a massive conflict regarding their daughter, Avery. Because Ava has chosen to align herself romantically or strategically with Sidwell, Sonny has fundamentally shifted his view of her. This development could influence Ava's future drastically. Sonny might declare that she is no longer an ally, effectively rendering her an enemy in his turf war against Sidwell. More importantly, this indicates that Ava's visitation or custody rights regarding Avery could be revoked or sabotaged by Sonny at any moment. The narrative focuses on the fragility of Ava's maternal bonds when weighed against her questionable romantic judgments. I could be wrong, but I feel the writers are setting Ava up for a monumental fall from grace, orchestrated by her own lack of foresight. Shifting the focus to the hospital setting, the storyline shows that Jordan is regaining consciousness after a horrific hit-and-run accident. However, her awakening is fraught with psychological hurdles. The episode highlights that while she cannot explicitly remember the face or identity of the reckless driver who forced her off the road, the trauma of the event deeply haunts her. When analysing Jordan's mental state, this suggests a narrative exploration of PTSD. The character is portrayed as vulnerable and obsessed with the missing pieces of her memory. Curtis steps into the role of the comforting presence, attempting to ground her in reality. However, there is a lingering narrative thread regarding the surgical procedures Jordan underwent. Rumours within the story's universe suggest that there may have been complications or errors during her brain surgery. This development could influence her recovery in unpredictable ways. I think there is a strong narrative possibility that Jordan might suffer from localized amnesia, perhaps even failing to recognize Curtis or remembering the fundamental dynamics of their relationship. This situation reflects a staple soap opera trope, medical amnesia used to reset relationships or introduce new dramatic hurdles. While I am not entirely certain this will manifest, this indicates that the physical healing is only the beginning of Jordan's journey, and the emotional and cognitive recovery will be the true focus of her upcoming scenes. The mystery of who actually drove the car that struck Jordan is one of the most compelling whodunit arcs currently airing. The storyline shows Brooke Lynn crumbling under the weight of immense guilt. The narrative focuses on her internal torment, manifesting as severe nightmares where Jordan confronts her, demanding justice or revenge. This suggests that Brooke Lynn believes she is responsible for the accident. However, when analysing the structural tendencies of General Hospital, I feel compelled to question this seemingly obvious setup. In my opinion, the show might be employing a classic red herring. There is no concrete, irrefutable evidence shown to the audience that Brooke Lynn's car was the one that hit Jordan. The storyline appears to be setting up a scenario where Brooke Lynn is torturing herself over a fragmented memory or a misunderstanding of the night's events, purposefully misleading the viewers. Despite the ambiguity of her actual guilt, the repercussions of her belief that she is guilty are very real. The episode highlights Tracy stepping in to manage the crisis. Tracy, ever the pragmatic and ruthless matriarch, stops Brooke Lynn from confessing to the police. Tracy's motivation is clear. A confession, even an uncertain one, would instantly destroy Brooke Lynn and Chase's chances of finalising their new baby's adoption. This situation reflects a profound moral compromise. Furthermore, it drags Chase into a potential ethical nightmare. If Brooke Lynn confesses her fears to her husband, Chase a sworn police officer, he will be forced to choose between the law and his family. This development suggests that Chase might choose to cover up the evidence to protect his wife and their growing family. If the plot moves in this direction, this indicates that Chase will eventually have to face severe professional and legal consequences. The narrative beautifully juxtaposes Tracy's cold survival instincts against Brooke Lynn's fraying conscience and Chase's impending moral ruin. Finally, we arrive at what I consider the most emotionally devastating storyline currently in motion. The storyline shows Dante uncovering crucial new evidence related to an ongoing case. Initially, one might assume this evidence pertains to the mysterious death of Marco. The narrative focuses on Dante's relentless pursuit of the truth, a defining trait of his character. However, looking at the overarching dramatic arcs, I think the writers are preparing a much more tragic revelation. It is my interpretation that the audience is holding its breath, hoping the clues do not lead Dante to the truth about Cullen's shooting. The dramatic irony here is suffocating. The viewers are aware that Rocco, Dante's own teenage son, is the one who pulled the trigger on Cullen. This situation reflects the ultimate conflict for a character like Dante. The character is portrayed as a righteous enforcer of the law, but discovering that his own flesh and blood committed attempted murder would shatter his worldview. This development suggests that Dante would be physically and emotionally incapable of placing his own child in handcuffs and sending him to prison. Yet, the narrative structure does not allow secrets to stay buried. Assistant District Attorney Turner is circling the case. I feel that ADA Turner might be the one to uncover the secret of Rocco's guilt. If Turner obtains this information, this may lead to a scenario where she blackmails or legally corners Dante, forcing him to do the unthinkable, execute the arrest warrant on his own son. This indicates a deeply tragic trajectory. that will test the limits of Dante's morality, his loyalty to his badge, and his love for his family. In conclusion, the narrative architecture of General Hospital heading into mid-April is exceptionally dense. By utilising shifting identities, Cassius, coerced manipulations, Ezra and Laura, catastrophic medical mysteries, Jordan, and agonising moral dilemmas, Brooke Lynn, Chase, and Dent, the writers are creating a multifaceted viewing experience. Through my analysis, it is evident that the show is relying heavily on the psychological internal conflicts of its characters rather than just external action. Whether it is Brooke Lynn fighting her own mind, Ava blinding herself to reality, or Dante potentially facing the destruction of his family, the emotional stakes have rarely been higher. Once again, I must reiterate that these are merely my analytical observations. I could be wrong about the ultimate payoffs of these setups, and this is just my interpretation of the text provided. However, if the storyline continues to follow these structural breadcrumbs, the upcoming episodes will likely deliver some of the most emotionally resonant television the series has seen this year.